Hey guys, what is up, Phoenix here, and I'm back again in Tarkov, and today we're going to be touching on 2 points. So today's video will be a voiceover. This is gameplay that I recorded earlier this evening when I kind of jumped on and had a bit of a crack at it. But kind of some of the points I wanted to touch on, is some of the things that have basically, I guess they've kind of flared up in certain community areas, specifically on the subreddit, which is kind of where I get a lot of my information from when it comes to Tarkov. So two of the biggest things that seem to have just flared up out of basically nowhere, like they weren't really issues, and they are kind of related to each other, but they hadn't really been issues until like a week ago, and now they're massive issues, and it's an absolute pain in the ass. And if you can't tell by now, having looked at the title and just guessed, I'm talking about hatchlings and loot spawns and high value loot spawns and all that fun stuff. So there seems to be a substantial amount of people complaining about hatchlings just, I guess, rushing, and they seem to be encountering a lot of hatchlings. And now I won't debate this because I have encountered a relatively reasonable amount of hatchlings, but not every raid, and not a substantial amount. I guess the biggest issue people seem to have with them is that they seem to be taking up all of the good loot, which kind of brings on the second point of, well, no, hatchlings can't really take all of the good loot. Really what the issue is people are rushing spawns where, whatever item they're after, if it's a key or whatever, it may only spawn one every 100 raids, and they're just getting salty. Really, that's kind of the main point. But yeah, so there seems to be a large amount of people complaining about hatchlings, which, again, I have encountered them, so they're not. It's not as though they're just not there. They are, but nowhere near as much as they have been in any other, in any other patch. And this is basically something that Battlestate have done a fantastic job of. The economy is well-ish balanced. I'm not going to, say it's perfect, because it's not, but it's balanced well enough that, as someone who has done hatchling raids a relatively, frequent amount in, previous patches, I haven't felt the need to do them at all. I don't think I've done a single raid. You basically get given gear more so in this patch than you have in any other patch. You just don't need to. And that's led to basically no one runs hatchet because they have no stuff. There are outliers, but for the most part people don't run hatchling because they're out of gear. People tend to really only run it, and this may be possibly the only time I've done it this patch, for some of the stupid handover quests and stuff like that, where there's no point taking $150,000 worth of, or 150,000 rubles rather, worth of gear into a raid when you then have to stand in the middle of a field and just hold F for 35 seconds. But that's an entirely other issue. But ultimately, like, hatchlings just aren't as big of a problem as people seem to be making them out to be. Realistically, if you're getting upset over hatchlings, like, they're not taking your good loot. That good loot probably just didn't spawn, which it just doesn't half the time. And that's something I can absolutely attest to, having done shoreline raids looking for 310 and being the first person at 310 like numerous times, which is a room that was phenomenal in previous patches. You'd get amazing amounts of loot from it. I've been there probably 15 times, been the one to unlock it, and there's been nothing in there. So, like, Tarkov leaves you up to RNG just a lot, and I think people are misconstruing how much of the you're not getting good loot can be attributed just to the RNG, as opposed to hatchling stole my stuff, because most of the time they didn't. They just didn't. And that doesn't, it doesn't solve the problem of hatchlings, but realistically, they're not too big of a problem. You might get them every couple of raids, and that's unfortunate, but for the most part, it is people just trying to do quests rather than, rush high-value loot, because you get high-value loot. You get there about the same time as a geared player, and even if you don't, or in my case, in this particular raid, you forget your keys, there's high-tier loot pretty much everywhere. Like, you can make almost as much money just looking around the map, as opposed to, rushing particular spawns. For example, Kibba is basically a spawn that I rush constantly. It's really the only thing I do. I need to change is I rush Kibba, and I use it to build up my stash. I use it to build up, any attachments that I would need, or just cash in general. In this particular raid, I didn't, because I forgot my keys. I had my custom set of keys on me, not my interchange, and it screwed me out of it. But if you take your time to look around and to go through and loot, and to be entirely honest, this raid didn't even take me that long. I think this raid took a total of 12 minutes, which is probably pretty bang on what I spend when I just go to Kibber, because half of the time I'm sat in there waiting to see if someone's going to burst in and blow my head off. But, you know, if you go through and you check things and you loot things, you're going to make the same amount of, you know, return that you would going to some of the high tier loot spots. The only time it really becomes an issue is when you're, you know, doing things for quests, at which point we'll toughen up the quest design shit. But ultimately, you know, you're going to make as much money just doing a regular run, looking around the map, as you would rushing a point. And you won't make it as fast, but, you know, a couple of minutes here, a couple of minutes there doesn't particularly matter too much. Anyway, that's kind of just my thoughts on the current system, and the current kind of, I guess, culture and, you know, just the general vibe of the game at the moment in terms of hatchlings and, you know, just high tier loot in general. And, you know, one of the alternatives that has been mentioned is putting uses on all the keys, which is stupid. Don't do it. Absolutely not. It's ridiculous on factory. It doesn't even make sense on marked. You know, for example, again, another example of a high tier loot room being shit. I used the entirety of my marked key. Didn't get a goddamn thing. Not one. And it's just up to luck. So, yeah. Key durability, not a good idea. I've never broken my key off in the door, and I use it 3 times a day every goddamn day. So, you know, either Russian keys are shit, or may not be the best game design. Nevertheless, yeah, like I said, that's kind of my take on the current situation in regards to hatchlings and just the loot economy in general. And I mean, they kind of balance each other out. Really, one ties into the other. And people are complaining about hatchlings because they're ruining the economy. That's a sentence I never thought I'd utter. But yeah, people are complaining about hatchlings because, you know, they can't get their, you know, LED, you know, they can't get their high tier stuff. But realistically, most of the time, it's just not going to spawn. You know, and it's not a hatchling that's beat you to it. Suck it up. Welcome to RNG. But like I said, that's my thoughts, that's my opinions. I'm curious to see what you guys think, what are your experiences with hatchlings this patch. Mine is definitely far less than any previous patch. And yeah, like I said, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.